live from Johannesburg in South Africa on Channel Africa Radio from an African perspective. I'm Lulu Gaboo. I'm with Onele Nzinzi, Msibudi Makura and Buntle Headbush. Coming up in this hour, Amnesty in Kenya is calling for an investigation into the killing of protesters by Kenya's security forces during demonstrations last year. And
the rights of both Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace and security have been undermined, and the legitimate national aspirations of the Palestinians have been denied, while they endure Israel's continued presence that the International Court of Justice has found unlawful.
And the United Nations Secretary General says a promise of a two-state solution at risk of dwindling to the point of disappearance. But first the news with Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu, and greetings to our listeners. Nigeria has appointed Major General Abdul Salam Abubakar as its new commander for its fight against insurgencies in the northeast. This comes after renewed attacks in the last 4 months that have killed several civilians and soldiers in the region. Joelle Khodi reports.
Major General Abubakar's appointment comes as security experts say a surge in attacks in Nigeria's northeast by Boko Haram and its splinter rival ISWAP has raised fears of a major comeback by jihadists. Their tactics now include armed drones and explosive devices planted on major roads. At least 22 people were killed in weekend raids by militants in Adamawa and Borno states, while 26 others died on Monday after an explosive device ripped into 2 vehicles in Borno. Dozens more have been killed by a string of jihadist attacks since January. In Borno State, Governor Babagana Zulum has warned that insurgents are making gains with little pushback from the military.
Pressure is mounting to probe Kenya police and army officers involved at quelling last year's protests in the capital. Amnesty International and the Kenya Human Rights Commission have called for investigations into the killing of protesters by Kenya's security forces during demonstrations against the rise in taxes last year. The call follows a BBC Africa investigation exposing members of the security force who shot dead 3 protesters at Kenya's parliament, igniting public outrage and demands for justice. The wider clampdown by the security forces on a series of protests against the finance bill left at least 65 people dead. Rwanda's Foreign Minister Olivier Nduhungirehe has confirmed that he is facilitating the movement of SADC's troops and equipment from Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo through his country into Tanzania for repatriation. SADC terminated the deployment of its troops to the DRC last month. Operations were halted due to a major advance of Rwandan-backed M23 rebels in the Eastern DRC, Sean Bryce Peace reports.
Rwanda's Foreign Minister Olivier Nduhungirehe confirmed to SABC News that they were providing safe passage to Sami DRC and the equipment from their troop-contributing countries, which include South Africa, Malawi and Tanzania. SADC decided to terminate its deployment in eastern Congo following the deaths of 17 soldiers, bringing their December 2023 deployment to help restore peace in eastern Congo in support of the DRC government to a rapid end. Sami DRC troops were confined to their bases for months following the Rwandan-backed M23 advance in the region. Reports suggest the Sami DRC convoy will travel to Chato in northwestern Tanzania before repatriation to various countries.
Somalia has banned entry to Taiwan passport holders, citing compliance with the United Nations resolution. The island's foreign ministry is blaming Chinese pressure on Mogadishu at a time Taiwan is boosting ties with Somaliland. Somaliland broke away from Somalia in 1991 but has not gained widespread international recognition for its independence. The region has been mostly peaceful while Somalia has grappled with 3 decades of civil war. Taiwan, claimed by China as its own territory and likewise diplomatically isolated, and Somaliland set up representative offices in each other's capital in 2020 to the anger of both Mogadishu and Beijing. Lastly, 14 people, including 2 children, have been killed in a massive fire at a hotel in the eastern Indian state of West Bengal. 2 people were also seriously injured in the fire, which started last night in Rituja Hotel in Kolkata city. 88 people were staying in the hotel when the fire broke out. The blaze is now under control, but authorities say they're still carrying out rescue operations. The local police chief, Manoj Verma, gave a statement to reporters.
As far as our team has observed during the search operation, there are at least 15 casualties. Several people were rescued from rooms and the roof of the hotel. 5 individuals were rescued from inside the hotel and 20 were brought down from the roof.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Rory McIlroy to play the Scottish Open before the Portrush bid, while Jack Draper advances in Madrid as matches resume. I have details of these and other stories at 12:30.
Africa Update on Channel Africa. The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
Just the other day, I went to pick up my daughter from school, and as per usual, her friends, they usually come to my car just to say hellos and goodbyes. So this particular day, they made this comment about my jacket, saying that it's giving baddie vibes.
You say my jacket is giving what?
Baddie vibes. It got me thinking, where did the baddies come from? Because nothing is new under the sun, as it is said.
I was like, oh yes, remember the Kenyan parliamentarian?
Her name is Millie Odhiambo.
When you are urging me to be a good example to the girls, the younger ones who are doing their first term, Mr. Speaker, if they are good girls, they'll never get corner office. Be as bad as Millie Odhiambo, you will be the mother of this house. So do not be cheated like the African culture, where you are told have decorum, be nice. I'm telling you, you will go nowhere. Be a bad girl like me.
And I thought to myself, that is the original baddie.
Saturday and Sunday mornings belong to the Morning Switch. 3 to 6 a.m. Central African Time. Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
It is 12:08 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Thank you to Onele Nzinzi and Msibudi Makura with our news and sporting update. Now, Amnesty International in Kenya is calling for an investigation into the killing of protesters by Kenya's security forces during demonstrations last year. The calls follow a BBC Africa Eye documentary exposing members of the country's security forces who shot dead 3 protesters at Parliament. Kenya's police watchdog says it is conducting an investigation and criticized the documentary for being one-sided. And for more on this, we are joined on the line by Amnesty International in Kenya's Executive Director, as Houghton Irungu. Houghton, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon, Lulu.
Now, according to Amnesty International, the protests left at least 65 people dead. There was a disappearance of about 89 people and thousands arrested. Government has put the death toll at 42. Why is there such a huge disparity? And what is their response to these, reports?
As Amnesty International, we documented with the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, that is the state-mandated human rights agency, the 65 deaths that took place last year, and of course the 89 enforced disappearances. So we cannot speak for the government figures, but we can definitely speak for the figures that we have verified. And those figures essentially came into very sharp national attention this week when the BBC released Blood Parliament, the documentary that essentially tracks the fateful events that happened on June 25th when protesters managed to get into the parliament and excessive and unlawful use of fire was used against protesters, leading to at least 6 deaths in the precincts of the parliament.
Now, what action is Amnesty taking in ensuring that a proper investigation is done and those that are guilty of senseless killings are brought to book?
Well, the challenge that we have in Kenya essentially is that the investigating arm of the government is either in cases like this, is either the Independent Policing Oversight Authority or the National Police Service themselves. And in cases which involve police officers, and as we heard on the Blood Parliament documentary, cases where you have senior commanding officers calling on other officers to kill protesters, the investigations are always very complicated. By the law, or according to the law, the police are required to hand over all weapons that have been discharged that have led to fatalities over to the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. They have an obligation to secure the crime scene, invite the IPOR to come in and collect forensic evidence. And of course, once the body is moved to the mortuary, there is a requirement that an independent post-mortem takes place. And not all of these steps are taken. Many of the witnesses that saw what happened are frightened to come forward without assurances of their safety. So as Amnesty International, our role has been to essentially accompany these incidents to make sure that the investigating agencies do their job, that there is sufficient public interest in the investigations moving to prosecutions in our courts, and ensuring that there are independent postmortems taking place. That is our role, alongside lobbying the executive and the legislative to make sure that their attention does not lift or there is no attempt to erase the crimes that have taken place.
And generally, how does Amnesty International fare when it comes to getting the attention of government and those in authority with regards to dealing with crisis that are brought to the fore by Amnesty International and other institutions?
I mean, our belief is that we are respected as a credible, evidence-based organization by the Kenyan authorities. They often respond to our requests for verification of data when we're producing reports. And the response by the police spokesperson that you referenced earlier, I think, is a response to the release of the Amnesty International State of Human Rights Global Report that we did yesterday, which essentially corroborated much of the evidence that we've seen over the last 11 months from the June period. So we continue to engage them robustly and we hope credibly, without any sense of sensationalism or drama on our part. We are not interested in anything except for justice and accountability for those that have been hurt and have been killed.
Now, Hansen, tell us more about the calls to sign a petition calling for a public inquiry into the killings.
We believe that a commission of inquiry, either at the level of the judiciary or at the level of the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, it has to be independent of the executive, and of course it has to be independent of the investigative policing and prosecution agencies. But an independent commission of inquiry would allow us to be able to understand why has there been such use of force against protesters in 2024. There were 1,800 protests that took place in Kenya over 2024. That's 4 protests every day. Not all of them were violent or violently suppressed, but some of the biggest rallies and demonstrations that took place saw really some of the worst excesses of police violence that we've seen in the history of Kenya, at least since independent history. So we think that it's important to essentially have this documented, discussed, and taken up at the highest levels of our 3 arms of government in order that we can ensure that there are police reforms that do not allow this to continue. I think it's also important to recognize that many of the 65, if not all of the 65 victims have not seen any convictions, have not seen any, a few have seen prosecutions of officers that were responded to. And I think that's the other aspect that citizens need to weigh in on, which is essentially to sign our petition, which is on our website, amnestykenya.org, for a commission of inquiry to be set up. Because I think, apart from that, we are likely to see recurrence of the violence that we saw last year, in this year, and in subsequent years.
Well, Houghton, thank you for joining us on Africa Update. We'll leave it here for today. And that is Amnesty International in Kenya's Executive Director, Houghton Irungu, joining us on the line. And as you heard, that petition is amnestykenya.org if you want to take part. You are listening to Africa Update, coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa.
Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba.
Sadio, quelles sont les motivations derrière la décision du général Mamadi Doumbouya d'accorder la grâce présidentielle à Moussa Dadis Camara?
Alors, officiellement ici, c'est pour des raisons de santé, et puis avec aussi à ajouter que c'est dans un élan de réconciliation nationale, c'est un cas social. Mais au-delà de ça, les journalistes ils voient sous un angle politique. Les moins critiques estiment que c'est pour peut-être faciliter un petit peu la réconciliation que pourrait tenter aujourd'hui le CNSD.
Vue d'Afrique, du lundi au vendredi de 15h à 16h, temps universel.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
It is 12:16 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Join us in conversation on our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook at Channel Africa, you can also send us your comments and voice notes to +2763, that's 406-9126, hashtag Africa Update, and let us know which country you're in. Today, on the International Day to End Corporal Punishment of Children, Save the Children South Africa says it stands unwavering in its commitment to protecting every child's fundamental right to a life free from violence. Despite South Africa's groundbreaking progress in prohibiting corporal punishment in all settings, the harsh reality is that many children continue to suffer in silence. Our studies show that 42% of children in South Africa have experienced some form of violence during their childhood, highlighting the urgent need for collective action. And for more on this, we are joined on the line by Megan Bride, Director of Programs at Save the Children. Megan, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Now, Megan, is corporal punishment a human right violation, and what is its impact on children?
It is definitely a violation of human rights, and particularly children's rights. I think that, we use corporal punishment, or we justify it by saying that it is an acceptable form of punishment. But if we think as adults, it's not acceptable for us to show our displeasure by physically assaulting somebody. And we can say the same for children. It's a physical violation, and it has long-standing emotional impacts on a child. It's humiliating. It creates heightened feelings of anxiety and of fear.
Now, 42% of children in South Africa still experience corporal punishment. Are the figures similar within the continent?
I think the figures across the continent are even higher than 42%. I think, considering that South Africa has legislation that is promoting or is against corporal punishment, has helped us. But internationally, only 15% of children are protected by law against corporal punishment. So I think South Africa, although this is a stark figure, and for us it's not an acceptable figure, I think across Africa the figure would be higher.
Is the government, or are governments, doing enough to ensure that each and every child is protected?
I think that, there is a will, but the challenge always comes with actual affecting change. So we have laws, we have legislation, policies, guidelines, but it's how well we put these into practice really speaks to how effective our governments are. And I do believe across the continent of Africa, and including, of course, South Africa, that we do not value or heighten the protection of children to the level that it's needed. These children, and I know we hear this all the time, they are our future, but we don't invest enough in understanding the impact of the decisions we make now on their ability to lead as we go forward.
Now, I just, we seem to be going through a lot in terms of every couple of months or so to speak, we find young people attacking a teacher in class, young people stabbing each other, and things like that, things that are happening in school premises or just outside the school premises, and teachers having to defend themselves from violence that is put on them by children. Now, if we go back to probably during our time in school, corporal punishment was used to enforce the rules, in the sense that if you did not submit your homework, you knew you were going to get punished in class before you get home to get another punishment from your parents because you didn't submit your work, and the teachers have called and they're complaining. Now, are we not sort of building a society of children who feel they have rights to even put their hands on adults who are supposedly there to teach them, educate them? How do we deal with a crisis that we are facing as a country in South Africa? Because it is disturbing to see such incidences taking place. And the reality is it happens all the time.
Yeah. So first of all, I think, of course it's disturbing. There's different elements at play. So first of all, a lot is more visible today than it ever was when we were growing up. So we always do get a sense of heightened crisis when it comes to violence. But that being said, I think that our biggest challenge is we normalize violence as an acceptable way of solving our problems. So when we use violence against children, we're basically saying that it's okay, that there's nothing wrong when you're aggravated or you're upset or you feel you're not heard to actually react in a violent way. Now, it's not okay for children to hit or act out violently against their teachers, but when we as the adults don't demonstrate the correct way in our behaviors, how do children learn what is best? So we can absolutely say, yeah, my parent gave me a hiding and look at me, I'm okay, I'm fine. But think back to that hiding. Think back to the feelings of utter humiliation that you felt. Think back to your emotional bond with your parent. How did that make you feel about your parent or about your teacher or about your school environment? None of it was healthy. And what we need to be doing is giving our children other options. We need to be demonstrating respectful behavior. We need to be demonstrating non-violent behavior if we're going to guide them to be more effective adults and not be acting out violently against each other, acting out against their teachers.
Megan, we have run out of time, but I have to ask very quickly, what are the permanent solutions that can be put in place with regards to ending corporal punishment?
Definitely, our legislation needs to be enforced, but very importantly, before we enforcing legislation, we need to be giving space where we can educate parents, educate teachers, and give better alternatives to corporal punishment.
Megan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
On Africa Update. That's Megan Bride, Director of Program at Save the Children, joining us on the line.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
The Forum for South Africa, a social justice and human rights activist forum, is calling on Zimbabwe's health department to be held accountable for refusing to attend to a South African who fell ill while working in Zimbabwe. The forum is urging the Premier of South Africa's Limpopo province, Poppy Ramathuba, and the member of the Executive Council of Health, Diketseng Mashego, to explain what work the person was doing in Zimbabwe when the refusal came. And for more, we are joined on the line by Tebogo Msholompane, the national leader of the Forum for South Africa. Tebogo, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you so much for having us, and good day to you.
Now, Tebogo, tell us more about the person who fell ill, and what do you know about this?
Yeah, what we learned that the person was ill in Zimbabwe working. That is why we're saying the Premier is not also giving us more information, because we need clarity. We don't want to speculate, and end of the day we are told a different story. But our interest is that the South African was ill in Zimbabwe, and then they could not assist him, and so the Premier of Limpopo had to organize make arrangement for the person to come to the country. The person was airlifted to come here, and then we are also told that they used a private ambulance from where the person was to the border, and then he was picked up from the border to the country. So we are saying this is uncalled for, in a sense that we are staying here with a lot of Zimbabweans in the country who are using the resources of South Africa. South Africans have been complaining that our budget cannot cater for all the millions that are here, even others. But for now, we'll talk about Zimbabwe. But when one individual is there and then cannot be assisted, that becomes a problem to all of us.
Now, you've come out strongly about foreign nationals who use South Africa's facilities free of charge. Elaborate on this, and what are you hoping will come out from this particular issue, and the questions that have been posed to the Premier and the Premier's office?
Yeah, one, we are disappointed in the fact that a lot of Zimbabweans are in the country, millions, not thousands, millions are in the country. They're using the resources of the country. They've got learners who are attending school in public schools. They are also catered by the South African taxpayers. And then and now when it happens like this, it becomes a problem to us to say, you want us to practice Ubuntu, but you don't practice Ubuntu in your own country. When South Africans complain and say, we are unemployed because there's a lot of Zimbabweans in the country, some are even employed in the medical space, they are working as doctors and nurses, and South Africans complain, they are called xenophobic. But when a South African is in Zimbabwe and then nobody's saying anything, the government of Zimbabwe just say, no, we cannot assist you. So that is something that, we don't take it cheap and light, because South Africa is also struggling like any other countries. And then we know that, especially now with regard to the issue of budget, we can see that the budget did not pass because of the VAT increase and stuff forward and backward, because people cannot afford. And then now also there are people also who are undocumented in this country from Zimbabwe who are also using the facility. And then the very same Premier complained when she was the MEC for health. She says, but you cannot just come here and cross the border and expect me to assist you. You don't even have the document. She was, there were too much harsh response towards the minister to say, you lack Ubuntu, you lack this. And she was not only referring to that woman. There were many people who came here and then using the resources of Limpopo. And we understand the economy of Limpopo. It is so. And then, but the resources there are not even enough for the people of Limpopo. So that is the problem. And with regard to the Premier, we are saying to the Premier, just come clear, explain to us what was this person doing there. Was it on the mandate of the government? Was it a private work? That will also assist us to push further issues of lack of Ubuntu. Because now if we don't have full information and then we are just told, no, he came and then that's it. We want accountability also, because remember, it's also the resources of the country that also fetch the person. Not that they are saying they must not fetch him, but they're simply saying we need accountability, we need transparency to say this person was there and then they could not assist him, and then the government sent him there, or he went privately. So, and
Well, Dabuho, thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. We'll leave it there for today.
Okay, no, thank you so much.
That's Dabuho Mashalumpana, the national leader of the Forum for South Africa, joining us on the line. It is 12:30, and our news headlines up next with Onelin Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has reaffirmed his country's readiness to fully support Angola in critical sectors, including police, defense, health, tourism, and agriculture, amongst others. As the world wraps up Vaccination Week today, a new study for Cochrane South Africa looks at what works and what doesn't work in health care. And a U.S. Representative Josh Simons has told the International Court of Justice in The Hague in the Netherlands that the ongoing conflict in Gaza is a critical issue for the international community. Channel Africa News, I'm Onelin Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Onele. We say good afternoon to Msibudi Makura with our sports update.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Very good afternoon from the sports desk. Now, 2 players have withdrawn from the Bafana Chan squad that is set to face off with Malawi in the final round of the Chan qualifiers. The SA men's national football team will lock horns with Malawi in the first leg of the Chan tournament on the 3rd of May at the Republic Stadium in Lilongwe. Meanwhile, the second leg encounter is scheduled to take place at Loftus Versfeld in South Africa's capital city, Pretoria, on the 11th of May. Bafana squad assembled for camp in Johannesburg on Monday and are expected to travel to Malawi on the 1st of May. The Nzeki coached side progressed to the final round of the Chan qualifiers after defeating Egypt 4-2 on aggregate. Now, the 2-legged clashes were played in March of this year. Onto this now. The South African Sports Confederation Olympic as well as Paralympic Committee President Barry Hendricks highly compliments his organization's sports business model. Now, speaking to Channel Africa Sport, Hendricks unpacks SASCOC's model and also confidently recommends it to other African countries.
So there are various aspects to providing a stable organization. One is you ensure that your policies are in place and you only operate within your policies. This can be finance policies, HR policies, travel policies, and a whole host of others. But then also tied to those policies, you have each different unit of the business, such as the administration or operations of the organization. You have programs of the operations, and then you also have this oversight and strategic oversight from what you call the executive of the board. You have to separate the areas of responsibility from the board, which is oversight and strategy, from that of the CEO and the staff, which is operations and implementation.
On to athletics news now. Africa's sprint king Ferdinand Omanyala is fired up for another crack at glory as he lands up in the star-studded field in the Shanghai Diamond League this weekend. Omanyala hopes to go one better after finishing second to the informed South African Akani Simbene at the China Diamond League opening leg over the weekend. Omanyala clocked 10.13 seconds, Simbene clocking 9.99 seconds, with Britain's Jeremiah Azu settling for third in 10.17 seconds. Botswana's Olympic 200-meter champion Litsile Tebogo surprisingly faded to 7th, crossing the line in 10.20 seconds. Now, the Shanghai stage will not be any easier with Simbene, Jamaica's Olympic silver medalist Keshan Thompson, Tebogo, as well as 3-time world champion Christian Coleman of the USA also in the mix. Omanyala is winless against Simbene in their 2 meetings so far. In tennis news now, Jack Draper reached the round of 16 at the Madrid Open after opponent Matteo Berrettini retired injured as play resumed following a nationwide power cut. Now, play was suspended on Monday in the Spanish capital after the electronic line calling system as well as scoreboards went down. Power was then restored to the venue on Tuesday morning, allowing fifth seed Draper to take on Italian Berrettini, who is ranked 30th in the world. Draper won the opening set 7-6 in a tiebreaker after 57 minutes, finally converting his set point to an opportunity. At the end of the set, Berrettini then withdrew from the match after speaking to Draper, indicating he had an abdominal problem. Draper will now face American Tommy Paul in the last round of 16 of the Madrid Open. And finally, Rory McIlroy will play the Scottish Open at the Renaissance Club as a part of his preparations for the Open Championship in his native Northern Ireland. Now, the Masters champion will aim to win a second Open title at Royal Portrush from the 17th until the 20th of July. The Scottish Open is the final event before golf's fourth and final major of the year, and McIlroy will return to the Renaissance Club in North at Berwick, where he won the title in 2023 by beating Scotland's Bob McIntyre by one shot. McIlroy became only the sixth man to complete a career Grand Slam of major wins when he beat Justin Rose in the playoff at Augusta earlier on this month. The next big target for the world number 2 is the US PGA Championship at Quill Hallow, a course where he has won 4 times from the 15th until the 18th of May. So that's essentially that competition essentially coming up next month. It's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. It's 12:30, 6 p.m. Central African Time. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
Just the other day, I went to pick up my daughter from school, and as per usual, her friends don't usually come to my car just to say hellos and goodbyes. So this particular day, they made this comment about my jacket, saying that it's giving baddie vibes.
You say my jacket is giving what?
It's giving baddie vibes. It got me thinking, where did the baddies come from? Because nothing is new under the sun, as it is said. I was like, oh yes, remember the Kenyan parliamentarian? Her name is Millie Odhiambo.
When you are urging me to be a good example to the girls, the younger ones who are doing their first term, Mr. Speaker, if they are good girls, they'll never get corner office. Be as bad as Millie Odhiambo, you will be the mother of this house. So do not be cheated like the African culture, where you are told have decorum, be nice. I'm telling you, you will go nowhere. Be a bad girl like me.
And I thought to myself, that is the original baddie.
Saturday and Sunday mornings belong to the Morning Switch. 3 to 6 a.m. Central African Time. Africa Update on Channel Africa.
It is 12:38 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Our business news up next with Buntle Hedbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Lulu, and good afternoon to our listeners. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed business leader Dr. Alistair Reuters as Special Advisor for Investment Promotion. Dr. Reuters is a former Trade and Industry Department Director General. His appointment comes as government implements a broad range of economic reforms aimed at making South Africa more attractive for investors. Presidential spokesperson Vincent Magwenya.
Dr. Reuters will advise President Ramaphosa on South Africa's continuing investment drive, which is a principal component of the 7th administration's focus on inclusive economic growth and job creation.
South Africa's Electricity Minister, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, will be one of the main speakers at the second G20 Energy Transitions Working Group meeting in Cape Town over the next 3 days. The aim of the meeting is to bring together industry role players from across the world. They will collaborate on advancing sustainable energy transitions, fostering essential cooperation and knowledge sharing. Zaline Marrington reports.
Key focus areas of recent G20 presidencies include just energy transitions by Indonesia in 2022, green innovation and South-South cooperation in 2023 by India. During its presidency, South Africa's priorities will include energy security and affordable, reliable access, and just, affordable and inclusive energy transitions.
Electrical experts have cautioned South Africans to get surge protection devices to avoid complicating their insurance claims. This follows uncertainty on the stability of the grid, coupled with the possibility of lightning. Engineer Dr. M. says insurers are increasingly requiring that property owners get surge protection devices.
You want to be looking at point of use surge protection or in the distribution board. So the distribution board gives you some global protection, and the point of use protects specific equipment. So very much your sensitive things like TVs, fridges, sound systems.
Kenya's inflation rate in April rose to 4.1% year-on-year, up from 3.6% a month before. The Kenya National Bureau of Statistics says on a monthly basis, inflation was at 0.3% in April. Kenya's inflation rate has risen steadily since a low of 2.7% in October, but remains well within the central bank's 2.5 to 7.5 target range. Earlier this month, Kenya's central bank cut its policy interest rate for the fifth meeting in a row to 10.0%, a surprise move aimed at further stimulating the private sector lending. Manufacturing activity in China has fallen this month more sharply than economists had predicted. The Purchasing Managers' Index dropped from its highest level in a year last month. This as US President Donald Trump's tariffs kicked in along with retaliatory taxes that China has imposed. The BBC's Nick Marsh has the details.
The extent of this drop is down in part to a flurry of exports last month, as manufacturers rushed to ship out goods just before the tariffs kicked in. Last week, policymakers in Beijing announced more stimulus measures to try and help domestic consumers spend more and ease the economy off of its reliance on exports to the United States. Neither side so far has made the first move towards negotiations in this trade war, which China's leadership has vowed to fight until the bitter end if necessary.
Now, for a look at our indicators this afternoon, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 601. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 537. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 42, and in Zambia, it's at 27 kwacha 87. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 64. Russia, 82 rubles 9. In India, it's at 85 rupees 16. China, it's at 7 yuan 27. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 18 rand 53. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Looking at our commodities, gold is trading at $3,285 and platinum at $965 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $63.06 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Wintle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Well, thank you to Buntle Headbush with our business news. Now join us in conversation on our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook at Channel Africa. You can also send us your comments and voice notes to +2763. That's 406-9126 hashtag Africa Updates, and let us know which country you're in. And if you have any stories that you'd like us to highlight or to focus on, send us an email. It is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or give us a call on +2711 714 4459.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
Now let's take a look at other stories that are making headlines across the globe. We start in the United Arab Emirates, where the state media is reporting that security services foiled an attempt by Sudanese military leaders to legally transfer weapons and equipment to Sudan's army. Now authorities are believed to have uncovered a plan by a group which included Sudan's former intelligence chief Salah Ghosh. Sudan's armed forces have repeatedly accused the United Arab Emirates of arming the paramilitary rapid support forces. Now the UAE has denied those accusations. And then also we move to Sweden, where the police in Sweden have apprehended a 16-year-old suspect after 3 people were killed following a shooting at a hair salon. The suspect is suspected of murder and is one of several people being interrogated as part of the investigation. Police believe it is an isolated event and not linked to the Walpurgis night celebrations expected to take place later today. And also we look at Russia, what's happening there. Russia having launched 108 drones late on Tuesday and overnight to attack targets in Ukraine. This is according to Kyiv's Air Force. Dnipro and Kharkiv were the main targets of the attack, and Ukraine's Air Force says it shot down 50 drones while 22 others disappeared from radars without reaching their targets. These are just some of the stories making headlines across the globe. You're listening to Africa Update, coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
Now, as the world wraps up Vaccination Week today, a new study by Cochrane South Africa looks at what works and what doesn't work in healthcare. Cochrane South Africa is a research unit of the South African Medical Research Council. Joining us now to discuss this further is Annalisa Jaka, a specialist scientist at Cochrane South Africa. Annalisa, good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon to you and your listeners, Lulu. Thanks for having me.
Now, let's begin with some of the key findings of the reviews that was done, and what do they exactly mean?
Definitely. There are certain findings. Definitely, education and awareness raising campaigns about the benefits of vaccination is needed because we found out.
Right, we lost that connection to Annalisa. We will try and get it back on the line as we try to unpack what Vaccination Week is all about and what Cochrane South Africa's research unit has found with regards to Vaccination Week and what that research unit uncovered. We're listening to Africa Update, coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa.
Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa.
Annalisa, you're back on the line with us. Thank you for joining us once again. You're about to go into the key findings of the reviews that were done and what they exactly mean.
Oh, definitely. So specifically, one of our scientists led 2 qualitative research projects that looked at routine childhood vaccination and HPV vaccination. So some of the main findings, I'll just mention a few, include the fact that people's views and practices about vaccination are actually influenced by many complex social factors than just knowledge and awareness about vaccines. So these factors include people's broader views and values about health, illness, childhood, parenting, sexuality, and gender. For example, in the case of HPV vaccination, parents always ask themselves, why do you want us to get our children vaccinated with the HPV vaccination? Because do you want to increase sexual activity? Do you want to motivate sexual activities amongst our children? So that's one major issue concerning that particular vaccination. And then there's also people's social relationships and networks and the vaccination norms within these. For example, if you are surrounded by a certain social network that's got certain views about vaccination, chances are you will inherit the same views as theirs, regarding vaccinations. And there's also wider political issues and power relations, and the impact of these on people's trust in experts. Do people trust the experts? Do they trust the policymakers? Do they trust the healthcare workers who are giving these vaccines? So essentially, the reviews showed how decisions about vaccination go far beyond a simple evaluation of the safety and the effectiveness of vaccines. And
Now, why did Cochrane South Africa decide to focus on the vaccination reviews?
We do vaccination work at Cochrane South Africa because we want to explore people's views. We want to explore how people feel about vaccines, because there are, sometimes issues where people are hesitant, they're not confident in vaccines. So we want to explore why do they feel hesitant? Why do they sometimes delay, going to healthcare facilities to get vaccination? So we always try to understand. There are also issues where they ask themselves, is a certain vaccine effective? What are the, side effects of certain vaccines? What is the efficacy? Does it really work? So that's why we do research and get it out there to try and kind of increase confidence of vaccination amongst people.
Now, with increasing confidence among people about vaccination, what are some of the implications of these findings, and what do they suggest is needed to be done?
Yeah, so we really need to, put efforts into implementing or going out there, doing education and awareness raising campaigns about the benefits of vaccines. So there's a need for broader community engagement and trust-building strategies which target the more complex social factors influencing vaccination. So strategies that focus on listening to and engaging the communities, actually, so that they understand the values and the concerns, and we understand their values and their concerns, and address those values and concerns, and also improving the quality and accessibility of healthcare services, including vaccination services. Yes, that's paramount. So we would need to do this so that we can address, even the service level factors that hinder access and convenience about vaccination. So, for example, the service level factors would include factors like mitigating vaccine stock outs, strengthening the vaccine supply chain, implementing evidence-based strategies to increase vaccine stock management, so that when parents or caregivers bring their children for vaccination or take their children for vaccination to healthcare facilities, they're not told that, we've run out of vaccine A, we've run out of this vaccine. So we want to ensure that when people access healthcare facilities, they can always get vaccinated for the vaccine that they were there for.
Now, Annalisa, before we wrap up, just tell us who Cochrane SA is and what other recent and upcoming research are you working on currently?
Like you said before, Cochrane South Africa is one of the units at the South African Medical Research Council, and really our focus involves synthesizing research evidence on any related health topic. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, there were lots of controversies regarding whether ivermectin should be used to treat individuals diagnosed with COVID-19. And so people were asking themselves questions: is this therapy effective? Can it be used? So this is exactly where Cochrane South Africa comes in. We synthesized available, relevant, and up-to-date research evidence to inform the public, about questions around this. And we not only work on vaccination-related research, there's also a very important area called preparedness and pandemics, which is done so that the country and the whole continent of Africa can respond more quickly and effectively to pandemics and other health emergencies. So we don't want to be caught off guard like we were during the COVID-19 pandemic. So one of our scientists is actually leading the work at the continental level. The second area is methods research and training. We build capacity around relevant evidence-based research tools. So we do not want to be the only ones who are equipped at Cochrane South Africa. So we build capacity around the country and to a certain extent actually around Africa. So that all scientists, not only at Cochrane South Africa, but in the whole country, going far as Africa, are equipped to deal with pandemics and so many other health emergencies. And the last one is social behavioral science, where we do qualitative research to just explore people's experiences, views, and practices about health states like vaccination. So those are the key main areas which we focus on.
Well, Annalisa, thank you for your time on Africa Update. We'll leave it there for today.
Thank you so much, Lulu.
That's Annalisa Jaka, a specialist scientist at Cochrane, South Africa, joining us on the line.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
The United Nations Secretary General has told the Security Council that the promise of a two-state solution was at risk of dwindling to the point of disappearance. Antonio Guterres was addressing the Council's quarterly open debate on the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. He recalled how for nearly 2 months Israel has blocked all life-saving humanitarian aid into the Gaza enclave amid the resumption of hostilities after the collapse of a ceasefire in March, while pointing to proceedings currently underway at the International Court of Justice in relation to Israel's legal obligations to allow and facilitate humanitarian aid in territories it currently occupies. Show Bryce Peace has more.
Guterres referred to the region as being at a hinge point in history as questions continue to simmer around the fading hopes of a decades-long promise of a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine.
Today, the promise of a two-state solution is at risk of dwindling to the point of disappearance. The political commitment to this long-standing goal is farther than it has ever been. As a result, the rights of both Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace and security have been undermined, and the legitimate national aspirations of the Palestinians have been denied, while they endure Israel's continued presence that the International Court of Justice has found unlawful. And since the horrific 7 October terror attacks by Hamas, it has gotten worse on every front.
Guterres pointed to a situation in turmoil, an unrelenting conflict and devastation in Gaza, including utterly inhumane conditions of life imposed on its people, including the Israeli hostages still held by Hamas. Israeli military operations in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, settlement expansion, and the dramatic altering of the region's geography. Settler violence continuing against the Palestinian population, while Palestinian attacks against Israelis in both Israel and the West Bank also continue.
Getting an appointment for... Well, that is Show Bryce Peace, report, our correspondent in the US, ending that report on Palestine and the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Well, we say happy hump day. It is Wednesday, and hello to Double Ho, a part of the Upside team.
Yes,
what's coming up today?
What's coming up today? We've experienced fine dining or eating on a boat, on a yacht. We've experienced that.
Okay.
We've heard about sky dining. dining in the sky.
Yes, dining in the sky.
We've heard about dining on a train.
Yes.
But what about dining in a double-decker bus?
Oh, yes.
A double-decker bus.
Yeah.
This is happening in Cape Town. They're called bus cuisine, and we'll find out a bit more about this new way of dining and what an experience that's going to be. I've never been on one myself personally. Have you?
No. I've just seen it. I've seen it on social media platforms.
My concern is that what about those people who are motion sick and
No, then don't do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
And then our second conversation will be about meal prep. Are you much of a meal prepper? Do you prefer having your meals made by someone else and you just store it in the refrigerator, in the freezer for the rest of the month? Is that your kind of vibe?
No.
Does it appeal to you?
No.
All right. It's starting to appeal to me because, oh my goodness, my laziness when it comes to cooking. But I'm starting to entertain that idea. And then we get into conversation about an initiative that's called Don't Waste, Create. Instead of throwing papers away and rubbish, you just make art out of it and express your emotions through it. That's all coming up this afternoon.
All of that and more coming up on the upside with Tebogo Lekhuleni and Nompumelelo Ngubeni. For myself, Lulu Gaboo, and the Africa Update team, it's been a great day. Continue with us on our socials, and thank you from our team. It's producer Tracy Bumgard, technical operator Dumelo Mukwena, and social media Elaine Bengani. Goodbye. Let's do this again tomorrow.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has reaffirmed his country's readiness to fully support Angola in critical sectors, including police, defense, health, tourism, and agriculture, amongst others. El-Sisi made the remarks during a meeting in Cairo with Angolan President João Lourenço's visit, which sought to strengthen bilateral security across the